To Biology 121 Online. Today's video we're going to talk about intersex. So, in order to talk about intersex, we first have to talk about the difference between gender and sex. When we think about two different and distinctive branches of science, sociology is the science of how human societies work, while biology is the science of how living things work, including human things. Gender is a concept that belongs properly to sociology. Sex is a concept that properly belongs to biology. Things other than humans have sexes, including plants. Typically, in both cases, genders classically are considered to be sometimes male, sometimes female. We also recognize non-binary genders and many more genders than that. There are more than just 3 genders. In biology, we most traditionally think of sex as pertaining to either male or female. Today, our focus is going to be on intersex, which are things that are not entirely male or female from a biological perspective. Now, in humans are typically assigned a sex at birth, either assigned female at birth, assigned male at birth, or in some cases, assigned some other sex at birth. Most of you will be familiar already with the concept of transgender. In order to understand what transgender means, we first have to understand 2 words in Latin that are antonyms. If someone's gender matches their sex, male to male or female with female, we use the Latin root cis, which means on the same side as, in order to indicate a cis male or cis female person. On the other hand, if a person's gender is mismatched from their sex, we often will use the word trans to refer to their gender. A trans female is someone who was assigned the male sex at birth, but is a female gender. A transgender male, again, was assigned female at birth, but is by gender male. So that's our distinction between gender and sex, which is important for talking about and thinking about what it is to be intersex. There are many, many ways of being intersex, and we're going to go through just a few of them today. So let's start with the sex chromosomes. The sex chromosomes in humans and in a bunch of other kinds of animals and in some kinds of plants are called the XY chromosomes. There are other forms of sex chromosomes that exist in other species of animals and plants. Humans happen to be XYs. So there are 2 homologous chromosomes, X chromosomes and Y chromosomes, which typically will pair together just like all of the other homologous paired chromosomes. These chromosomes contain genes that regulate sexual development during pregnancy and after birth. Most often, a human with 2 X chromosomes or any other XY species of individual, or individual of any other XY species, I should say, that has 2 X chromosomes will develop female sex traits, while an individual with 1 X chromosome and 1 Y chromosome will typically develop a male sexuality. That's because the Y chromosome contains genes that cue male development. However, there are some males, in humans it's about 1 out of every 25,000 males who are XX chromosomes, the chromosome karyotype that we most commonly associate with females, and another 1 in 100,000 females who carry an XY chromosomal genotype. Let's talk about how those XX males and XY females develop. So XX male syndrome occurs during recombination. Think back to the last video. We have sister chromatids that have crossed over and are recombining the DNA from this individual's mother and father. And so in this context, this would be a male gamete. So here's a sperm cell. We can tell it's a male gamete because it has both X and Y chromosomes. The Y chromosome is a shorter subset of the X chromosome. It's missing some of the genetic content. When they crossed over, this X chromosome now carries a crucial component of the Y chromosome's DNA, in particular a gene called the SRY gene from the father's Y chromosome is spliced onto the father's X chromosome. The SRY gene triggers male development, including the development of testes and testosterone during pregnancy. So, despite having a father's male X chromosome and a mother's female X chromosome, this male X chromosome is carrying Y chromosomal DNA and a Y chromosomal SRY gene. So, despite having two X chromosomes, this individual would be an XX male. XX males are infertile because they don't have all of the genetic content from the Y chromosome that is required to develop spermatozoa, but they do have the chromosomal content, the SRY gene, that will stimulate male development. On the other hand, XY females, also XY female syndrome, also known as Swyer syndrome, during fetal development, one of 5 different genes, including SRY, that's responsible for male development, might not express itself in the normal way. Normally, most often, this is due to a mutation in one of those 5 genes. That will result, or may result, in no testes forming, and the testes are responsible for cueing further male development. So instead, normal female development may proceed until puberty. I kind of offhandedly mentioned in the last video that males really are just genetically defective females, and from a developmental point of view, that's basically true. Without an SRY gene from a Y chromosome, humans develop as females. If the SRY gene is present on the Y chromosome but not expressed, then that human will develop as female. Now, normal female development may proceed until puberty, but the reduced estrogen from the lack of a second X chromosome usually results in no development of puberty in XY females, unless estrogen injections are provided, in which case normal female puberty proceeds. Now, a separate type of intersex. So we've talked thus far about XX males and XY females who are intersex because their sexual development does not match the normal association that we hold with their sex chromosomes. There are also monosomal and polyploid intersex people. And so what monosomy and polyploidy are is that sometimes during meiosis, the chromosomes don't split up evenly. So in a normal meiosis metaphase, we'll have 2 homologous doubled sistered chromatids splitting down the middle of this cell, and 2 of them should go to the bottom of the cell, and 2 of them should go to the top of the cell. But sometimes during anaphase, that gets mixed up, and so we end up with, in this case, they're only showing 4 chromosomes, or 2 pairs of chromosomes, and we might get an uneven split, so that 2 of the resulting gametes have an extra homologous chromosome, and 2 of the gametes have a missing chromosome. So these ones have the extra chromosomes, these ones are missing some chromosomes. So that results in an abnormal number of chromosomes in those gametes, which may be either egg cells or sperm cells. So when these abnormal gametes become part of a fertilization, it can result in a monosome, which is 1 unmatched chromosome, or a polyploidy, meaning that there are 3 or more homologous chromosomes instead of the more common 2. In most cases, monosomy and polyploidy result in non-viable zygotes, that is to say, a pregnancy that cannot be brought to term. But in a few cases, there are non-fatal effects on development. In humans, there are 3 trisomies that are survivable and can be brought to term and result in live birth in a living person, as well as a bunch of different sex chromosome monosomies and polyploidies. So the most common polyploidy in humans is Down syndrome. That's a trisomy on the 21st chromosome. Remember, the 21st chromosome is one of the very short ones, and if there were a third chromosome 21 in this karyotype, we'd be looking at someone with Down syndrome. That happens in about 1 out of 700 births. There's also something called Patau syndrome. That's much more rare, 1 in 5,000 births. That's a trisomy of chromosome 13. And Edwards syndrome, which is trisomy of chromosome 18, is even more rare, 1 out of 10,000 births. My specialty is not polyploidy, so I don't actually know myself what the effects of Patau syndrome and Edwards syndrome are, but they're easy to look up. That's beyond the scope of this video. We're talking about intersex here. So when we have sex chromosome monosomy and polyploidy, it can result in forms of intersex. So let's look at some common forms of sex chromosome monosomy and polyploidy that result in intersex. What I've presented here is a listing of which sex chromosomes may be present, what the name of this type of intersex is, how frequently it occurs, and how it presents typically at birth, and what the typical phenotype is, what the effects on a person might be. So there's one form of intersex known as Turner's syndrome, which is a monosomy of the sex chromosome. There's only a single X chromosome. That happens in about 1 out of every 2,500 people who are assigned female at birth. Obviously, this would be assigned female at birth because there is no Y chromosome present. There is an X chromosome, but as I said before, without a second X chromosome, that can cause complications in terms of normal female development. So, people with Turner syndrome experience infertility, which is typically treatable, although most often treatable through implantation of a fertilized egg. And they are at much higher risk of various forms of heart disease because of differences in the development of their aorta. A second form of intersex, known as triple X syndrome, involves a polyploidy with 3 X chromosomes, 2 from the mother, 1 from the father. This happens in about 1 out of every 1,000 people who are assigned female at birth, and it usually goes completely unnoticed. In some cases, there's some mild physical developmental impacts, including slightly increased height or an increased distance between the eyes. Klinefelter syndrome is a range of different polyploidies. You'll notice it appears on 2 different lines here, in which there are multiple X chromosomes and a single Y chromosome. Klinefelter syndrome can present with with multiple different X chromosomes. You might encounter 4 X chromosomes and a Y. If there was a mother with triple X syndrome who also happened to have a profound polyploidy in one of her egg cells, where all 3 X chromosomes ended up in the same egg cell, and then the father contributed a single Y chromosome. Or you might have 2 X chromosomes and a polyploidy from the mother, and an X chromosome and a Y chromosome, resulting in our relatively rare, more severe form of Klinefelter syndrome. In most cases, Klinefelter syndrome is quite common, 1 out of every 750 assigned male at birth. It's usually unnoticed, although in some cases, some physical development is mildly impacted. The larger the number of additional X chromosomes in a Klinefelter syndrome person, it's increasingly rare. It's about 1 in 30,000 for 3 X's and a Y, and it's about 1 in 100,000 for 4 X's and a Y. And in those cases, the physical development is more likely to be impacted through breast development during puberty and less body hair. There's another form of intersex known as XXYY syndrome. It's relatively rare, 1 in 30,000 people who are assigned male at birth. It's often unnoticed, although it may affect reproductive and mental development. So in some people with XXYY syndrome, they have fertility problems which may be solvable through endocrine injections. Finally, XYY is a type of polyploidy that is so commonly or so rarely noticed that it doesn't even have a name, and in some cases it has some impact on physical development. Remember, there are literally hundreds of different types of intersex. A small number of relatively common types of intersex are related to monosomy and polyploidy, but a very few rare types are related to known specific alleles. Most forms of intersex are related to genetic expression rather than genetic sequences, and for more information, I strongly encourage you to find the Intersex Society of North America at isna.org.